Joining the show today, we have, I guess I'm going to ask you, with Jess Myers, just casually covering the Gophers now, are you kind of just the godfather of Gopher hockey coverage at this point, or who do you think might slot in ahead of you?
I mean, I think Pat Micheletti is clearly the godfather of Gopher hockey at this point.
Sure.
But I was at media availability this weekend, the only media person there to talk to Bob and Oliver and Ryan. So we were on good terms today.
That's good. Well, everyone, Eric Vegoe, first appearance here on the show. Catch him every Wednesday. Have you guys missed a Wednesday for the live show, Vegs, with you and Jupe?
We take the bye weeks. So if the team doesn't play, we're going to take a week off. But otherwise, we are very consistent on Wednesday nights. We do it live and have a good time. Usually have a couple beers and overtime and, hoppy ones like you would enjoy.
Oh, that's what we love to hear. Well, let's go there real quick, because I feel like you and I, we're both on the hockey and beer bit, but you save them for overtime, and more often than not, they're pretty big beers. They're all double-digit percenters for the most part, right?
I like to go big or go home, and since I'm already home, I can go big with a beer during overtime because I'm usually just going to have one. Maybe I'll have a little bourbon to chase it, but why not pull something out of the cellar for overtime when we do Go for Buck Live?
That is always the move. Now, bourbon, what's your regular pick? Something that you're always going to have on the shelf? And what's your, oh yeah, I'm pulling this out if I'm special occasion, celebrate, whatever?
I mean, I'm pretty into the Old Forester 1910 type old fine whiskey. That's an enjoyable one that you can usually find at your local liquor store. If I'm looking for something special, though, I'm looking for one of those Four Roses barrel proof picks. Okay. I will look for the Old Forester barrel proof picks and, enjoy the things that our stores can bring in special when they pick barrels. I trust those guys. They know what they're doing.
So do you have a go-to store, or are you one of the people that hounds around and just is hunting for the good whiskey?
I am loyal to two main stores. I've got a Stinson Wine, Beer, and Spirits here in Northeast that I go to quite a bit, usually more beer-centric at that store, though they do have some good bourbon and wine. And then 1010 Washington Wine and Spirits. A lot of people are familiar with it in downtown. They get a lot of great barrel picks there. Don does a great job with his selection, and they reward the people that spend their money there.
Okay, well, last one on the bourbon. Do you have one that everyone's this one's the best, and you're no, not for me?
It's kind of tricky. I think there's a lot of people in my circles who like the Wild Turkey Russell's selections. I am not always into the Russell's picks. For whatever reason, I've had some of the Wild Turkey Generations, some Russell 10 years, and it hasn't quite hit my palate right. I have a Russell's 15 that I'm waiting on for the holidays to crack into.
Okay.
I got lucky in a raffle and got one of those at 1010 this year.
Okay. When you say holidays, does that mean Thanksgiving? Does that mean more Christmas holiday, or just literally any day that the family gets together to stop and celebrate? That's when we're popping a good whiskey.
It might be the GPL podcast on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, because we're going to have Jordan Leopold on with us, and that could be a good time with Nick Angel. So I might have to break open the Russell's 15 for that one.
Nice. Ooh. Well, everyone tune in for that. And I guess stay on live on YouTube if you want to catch the after hours edition and hear how that whiskey is, because that does not get included on the audio, which is a shame, but it's probably more entertaining on video anyways. If Jupe has a couple of pops.
Thanksgiving, we usually have a couple. So I'm cooking a little bit on Thursday, so I got to take it easy, but it should be a good show.
There we go. And with the NHL, it's pretty steadfast that American Thanksgiving is when you really stop and evaluate okay, who's for real and who's not. When do you do that in college hockey?
I mean, I really think the pairwise starts to make sense around this time of year. There's been enough non-conference games that you have a good idea which conferences are going to get multiple bids and which conferences are going to be fighting for just one or two bids come the end of the season. So I really think, pairwise is something you can start looking at right about now.
Okay. We can already look at that. God, that just seems early to me, to be honest.
It is early, but I think you're going to see, that the Hockey East is probably going to have 2 or 3 teams in that top 10, and CHC probably 2 teams in that top 10. Big Ten, probably 2 teams in that top 10. And it just kind of depends how the conference standings work out, which teams those are. But you can already tell, CCHA is going to be a tough league to get 2 bids. Minnesota State or Bemidji State is really going to have to go on a heater here to separate themselves and get that at large. So it looks like that league might just get 1.
Yeah.
Atlantic Hockey usually probably just getting the 1. ECAC, Cornell's not dominant. So what's going to happen there with them, Dartmouth and Harvard and Quinnipiac? I don't think all 4 of those teams are going to make it. So they're going to be fighting for 1 or 2 bids probably.
Okay, that's fair. And do you think this year, again, early, but we're starting to see the picture, Big Ten leading the way again, or what's the conference that everyone's following?
I think a lot of people are still watching BC, BU, Maine for Hockey East. They're watching Denver and who steps up in NCHC. And I think it's Michigan, Michigan State, and Minnesota in the Big Ten. And the big issue with the Gophers right now is their strength of schedule is not the typical strong top 5 strength of schedule. It's been a little bit lighter this year. They've tried to schedule a couple teams, but they like Omaha just has not panned out to be very good. Duluth, not panned out to be very good. The teams they've played so far in the Big Ten, we don't really know much about them. So a lot of unknowns, I think, for the Gophers, despite how good they look on the ice when they are playing.
Yeah. And so does that bode well or poorly that the last 2 series before the holiday break are Michigan and Michigan State?
I think it's a great measuring stick for Minnesota. I remember Bob's first year. He took over the team and they looked really good the first couple of weeks, and then they got punched in the mouth. And they really struggled after that. And he said, oh boy, I wish we would have played these teams earlier. I would have known what I was dealing with and I could have coached them up. Well, this year they've had a couple punches in the mouth and they've been able to get away with it up until the Saturday game against Bemidji. And so you're starting to see some of that resiliency. And I think they're building up their roster for these games with Michigan and Michigan State. I think it'll be a big boost to get August Falloon back this weekend for Notre Dame. And I think it'll be an even bigger boost to get Cal Thomas back in the lineup as they get ready for probably the most important games of their first half.
Yeah, and you caught Bob slipping up a little bit on his radio show, and we learned that Paulson is definitely out for a minute. Do we have any gauge on when he's coming back at this point?
It's definitely one of those injuries where he can't come back until the second half. He'll be able to skate here. It's an upper body injury. It's not super serious, but it just is one of those that takes time to heal. And they just want to protect him for the second half because he's going to be an important player for them. Bob was, felt sorry for him because he was just starting to click, with his line mates on the power play and find kind of how he could fit into this lineup. And then he gets hurt and now has to be on the shelf for a little bit. But he's going to be important. Centers are so critical in hockey, obviously with the Wild, as they've always been searching for those centers, and you got to count on them. They're not easy to replace.
That's for sure. And what do you think is the better fit for an Oliver Moore? Like, he's been flipped back and forth, center, wing, moved on a couple lines. Where's he going to find success?
I think at the start of the year, I was kind of chasing the idea that he might fit in better at wing to really use his speed. But the more that I've watched him, the more and more fits in the middle. He plays really low and he's got the acceleration, the quickness to jump into the play right away. He is never going to be a player that can't catch up. And so I think him having the discipline and the patience to play down low and then explode into the rush has actually been really nice for him this year. I still think he's got to get better on the dot. He's got to be better at faceoffs. Every week I go watch a little bit of practice and he's always working after the team skate on draws. And he is trying to get better at it, but it's a skill that he's got to make an asset.
It's funny, for like half a second, I thought when you said he's got to work on the dot, I thought you just meant taking one-timers from the dot.
he actually had a lot of chances on the power play on that second unit, getting passes from Luke Middlestad on the back door.
Luke's been feeding him.
It's like they have a connection, and Luke just finds him. Ollie was just having a hard time converting. It was good to see him get a goal this past weekend against Bemidji. Hopefully that unlocks him a little bit, maybe a little smoother on those backdoor plays. But he's got more potential that isn't tapped yet.
That's absolutely correct. And I wonder if you agree, and maybe it hasn't been as obvious on the score sheet the last couple series, but his, I guess, current and future teammate, Sam Rinzel, has he been the best player on the team this year, or who would you tap with that award?
It'd be hard not to give it to Rinzel. He's just been so dynamic on the rush. He's been confident on the blue line. You know, the only knock on him is maybe the power play hasn't been as smooth for him, but it's getting better. And he's creating chances from the top, and he's moving the puck around. I think the power play has more been an issue of how do you involve Jimmy Snuggerud the best? You know, he's so good on that off wing, on that dot with the one-timers like you're talking about. But when teams take that away, you have to find other things. And I think they're still getting comfortable finding those other options.
God, the almost just like copy paste what the Capitals have done. Like think back, like I don't know how closely you've watched the Capitals, you know, the past decade, but whenever they took Ovechkin away in a similar office over there, they had something working on the opposite side of the zone where it was basically you got Oshie hitting high slot. He's wide open if you're going to try and attack Nick Backstrom on the half wall. If you don't, he's going to step in and something's going to open up that he's going to thread. And if not, you got Carlson up top ready to rip a bomb too. Like they just basically worked that side of the ice and just let Ovechkin kind of hover to the side with someone else. Like, is that the best approach, or do you see something that maybe is a good coaching tip that you might throw from some of the Pee Wee coaching experience to capitalize on people overcommitting on Snuggerud?
Yeah, it's a little bit different going from Pee Wees to the Gophers from skill level. But I do think Minnesota oftentimes has a winger on their strong side playing opposite Snuggerud. And I understand that from the concept of you want to almost shrink the rink. And so you bring that player on their strong side. They're more able to create a lot of different opportunities. But you do sometimes want to see someone in their off wing in that spot. I just don't know if Minnesota has someone who really fits over there as a lefty who can one-time it and create from that spot. Sure. But it's something I would like to see at some point. And Rinzel isn't exactly the big threat from up top like you see in some of the NHL power plays to really make that work. So I think what the Gophers are trying to do is they're trying to move Snuggerud into different spots around, you know, anywhere underneath the top of the circles, both sides, around the net, in the corners, just to draw the penalty killer's eyes so they get out of their structure a little bit and create other opportunities. And it's just got to have the comfort to play anywhere if you're a Gopher forward on the power play.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, has anyone stood out to you as being a guy that like caught your attention just having a way better season than you had anticipated?
I mean, Brody Lamb has been scoring a lot more than I thought. You know, he was a player who almost came to Minnesota too early. He's one of those players where it might have been best for him to spend that extra year. You know, he had an okay year in Green Bay developing, but that team wasn't exactly successful in the USHL. You almost thought he would benefit from having another year of being a true leader at that level. Well, they kind of brought him in due to some early departures. And, you know, his skating was on par, but his physicality wasn't quite there. You know, his comfort in the offense, finding space wasn't quite there. He's finding it now. You know, he's a good option on that power play, even on that strong side. And he's winning second chances and winning pucks and getting pucks to the net. And that's what you need to have with a successful power play is guys who can win those second pucks.
And another guy that kind of got thrust in a little bit quicker than expected for the Wild fans out there. Talk about what you're liking in Jimmy Clark's game this year.
I think with Jimmy Clark, the compete level is what you need. at center. And he's a player who can battle in front of the net, in the corners, and in the faceoff circle. And that's probably the biggest question mark with this year's team, is who can take that role. They leaned so heavily on Jackson Nelson last year for faceoffs and leadership down the middle. Kind of a big skate boot to fill. And Jimmy Clark's been thrust into that position. And he's been pretty good so far, but I think there's room in his game too to grow at that position.
And we just love too the fact that the line that no one expected to be a line, you got Clark, Kurth, and Wood being the fourth line for most of the season. Is that the best bit that Bob has had, or is there another one I'm not thinking of?
I think he's probably just doing it to get at Joe Smith because he hates that kind of stuff, to quote him. I think the problem with Minnesota is someone's got to be fourth. So he's just having fun with it. I think those guys know that they're doing pretty well out there. Although if you ask Connor Kurth, don't mention the strong offseason that the program had, because he thinks it's beating a dead horse and he's ready to move on to the season. And that line is just producing really, really well right now. Matthew Wood just getting more comfortable by the week. And he's so good at holding on to pucks that really draws a lot of attention. That's been great for Connor Kurth and create a lot of space for him.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And I think we're starting to see like that line has certainly risen, but everyone's talked a lot this year about just the balance throughout the lineup, like a little bit different than, going back to 23 with having arguably the best college line that we've seen and then trickling down from there. Do you expect the balanced lineup throughout the year? Or do you think Bob is going to tinker with like, hey, how do we load one or two lines and see if we can like pummel people?
I think it's really early for them to load up anything, especially going through the injuries that they're going through right now.
Yeah.
It's really important for Bob to develop his whole lineup. That's one of the qualities that I think separates him as a head coach, is that he doesn't just give the top skilled players all the ice time right away from the start. He spreads it around and he lets players develop. Like, I don't think Jimmy Clark and Brody Lamb and Connor Kurth are having the seasons they do right now if Bob is one of the coaches who just plays a top 9 or a top 6.
Yeah.
He wants to develop that whole lineup. I certainly think he could do some things in a tight game to put more time on ice with Jimmy Snuggerud type players, Matthew Wood type players, but he's been a little hesitant to do that so far.
Sure. That's fair. I think the biggest question every week that you have that maybe you don't ask, at least this early on, of Bob is, who's the starter? Let's start with, when do you think a decision needs to be made on who the starter is, right? Because obviously, like, come postseason, that decision kind of has to be made. I'm okay riding both for the majority of the season, but at what point do you think that you got to start giving one of them both matchups for a weekend? This interview is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality, who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it, that makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 at checkout to take 10% off your entire order.
I think the first time you might do that would be Michigan State.
Okay.
When you get into that series, if you have a goalie who really shines on the Friday or really shines on the Saturday, you might give them the next start. So
Sure.
Aerie has kind of been the Friday goalie so far. If he comes into a Friday night and has like a shutout 40 save, 30 save performance, or 1 goal, 30, 40 save performance, you might give him a look at Saturday. Or if one of those games, Soulier, who's been the Saturday goalie, does a great job on Saturday, you might give him the next Friday and kind of send the message like, hey, This is an opportunity to take the net if you want it. But I don't think we see that until those last 2 series of December. And if not, then maybe you kind of wait to do that until January, February, kind of a similar mindset.
Sure. And do you have any inkling right now, just with what you're seeing? And obviously, like, 2 different goalies who are in very like different spots in their career and how much playing time they've seen. Is it as simple as saying like Airy has the most room to grow, and if he does it, it might be his, but Soulier is the one that's kind of got the position if we had to make a decision today?
I mean, I think Soulier was brought in as almost like a safety option for the coaching staff. You can't have a roster like they have this year and not have that kind of option to go to. Especially Nathan Airy, he came in with that lower body injury last year, missed half the season. You're not sure what you have there. I know when they recruited him and they first saw him, they're like, this is an experienced, big, technical goalie who's got some athleticism and likes to play the puck. And I think what you've seen so far with him at Minnesota, all those line up. The biggest thing with goalies is you just don't know the mental makeup that you're going to get. What's going to happen when they give up 2-3 goals at Yost in the first period? What happens when they let in a softie at home and the crowd goes silent? A Soulier, you at least have a track record of seeing how he handles that kind of pressure. We don't know that yet with Nathan Airy, and you just want to see him go through some of those things and see how he responds.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I don't think we know yet. Think we know yet. It's too early. They haven't played a tough enough schedule, and Bob wants to play both of them, through December.
Yeah, makes sense. In front of him there, the blue line, Bob has gone as far as to say like this is among the best blue lines that he's coached. I think we all know, just looking at the roster, like not quite the same firepower offensively, but like compare these guys to the 2023 crew.
Yeah, I don't think there's someone who's as dynamic as Jackson Lacombe on the blue line right now. Sam Rinzel is pretty close, but I always feel like Rinzel is feeling where the edge is versus Lacombe would push it all the time. And sometimes he would go over, but at the end of the game, you wanted the puck on Jackson Lacombe's stick because you knew he was going to create offense. That last year he played for the Gophers, there were numerous third periods with like 3 or 4 minutes to go where the Gophers were down or tied. And you're just like, they're probably going to pull this out because they've got some high-end talent. This year's team, I don't know if you have that kind of high-ender ability offensively, but I think it's bigger, it's heavier, and they're smoother top to bottom on breakouts and D-zone coverage, I think. This is probably one of the bigger blue lines that's still mobile that we've seen go for hockey in a long, long time.
We like that. We'll just ignore Kester, but
who's still like 5'11".
It's crazy though. He looks small, doesn't he?
He looks small compared to everybody else.
Yeah. And I'm going to be honest. I'm pretty sure for the first like 3 or 4 games, every game, Matthew Wood looked like he was like 3 inches taller than the previous game. Like he just looks so big out there.
He has got a long reach and he knows how to use it. He can just protect the puck and hold on to it and use his body contact and body position to buy time. And that's probably his best attribute. I watched quite a few preseason practices just to get a feel for him. And he just looks smooth in transition. Like pucks that are, well outside what a normal player would consider his reach. He just puts a stick out, pulls it in and protects it. And I didn't really see his ability to buy time and space until they started playing games. Sure. And when you play games against people like Omaha and Penn State and Wisconsin and Bemidji and now Notre Dame, that is such a valuable skill. And I think that's what makes that line click so well right now.
Yeah, and I was actually, after the Bemidji game on Thursday, I was talking to Slarks about this. Has there ever been a Gopher player that represented Team Canada in World Junior?
Oh, that is a good question. I can't really think of one. You look back at some of the Canadian recruits like the Chuckos, Peter Kennedy's. There was a goalie who's
a lot of goalies,
Canadian,
yeah.
And none of them have been that World Junior type player. So, yeah, I don't think there is.
Who do we think is going to be representing Team USA this year?
It's tricky. I was wondering if Zemer is going to make the team. He is a guy who's worn a letter for USA at a lot of events. And I think the staff really values that kind of leadership and a player who can accept a depth role. But I haven't looked at it super closely yet. I think they have their camp that'll come up after the year, and I expect all the eligible players from Minnesota to get invites. What are your thoughts on the World Junior stuff?
To be honest, most years it's like literally a week or two beforehand that I like full on deep dive into it. You got to think, because Rinzel and Moore are both eligible, right?
Yeah, and they're both guys who have done USA hockey stuff before. And you'd think they were both
kind of at the bottom of the roster last year, right? Like Moore slipped in a couple of spots, and I don't remember, was Rinzel bottom pair, or was he the extra guy?
Yeah, I don't think he and Middlestat got a lot of action, if I remember correctly. Boy, you're really stressing me, Hoppy, on this. I'm so focused on the season. I'm waiting for Chris. I'm waiting for Chris Peters, my expert of USA hockey, to start doing his deep dives on Team USA.
Well, we can look forward to World Juniors, because I'm pretty sure next week in the like CHL USA Prospect Showcase, USA is going to get absolutely destroyed. It's not going to be fun.
Yeah, we'll see. A lot of the USA players at that age level, are playing college, I think, right now. So it could be a tough matchup. But, USA has done great in these world events. They'll be in Ottawa this year and in St. Paul in the following year. That'll be pretty exciting. I've always been a big fan of the World Juniors. I didn't make it up when it was in Grand Forks. So I'm excited to see it coming to town.
I am with you there. Real quick then, aside from health, if the Gophers don't make the Frozen Four, what's the reason?
I think we've seen maybe a little bit of their weakness in their three tight games here with Omaha, Penn State, and now Bemidji. They've got to be able to manufacture goals in a game like that, and it's got to be a bigger commitment to net front presence. You look at some of the guys in the Gopher forwards lineup, I don't know if they're positioning themselves as an anchor in front of the net. They are kind of flying by a little bit, or they are opening up, looking for rebounds and tips with their blades instead of taking away eyes with their bodies and putting their numbers to the back of the goalie. So I think, if they aren't able to develop that skill, they could get into a tournament game where a team gets an early lead off a turnover like Bemidji did on Saturday, and then they lock it down. And the only way Minnesota was able to get a goal on Saturday was when they got the extra tacker on the ice. Bemidji got stretched. The Gophers got a pass across the Royal Road and put one away. Not a net front goal that you're hoping for in that situation. Yes, it was a great execution on the Royal Road pass.
You'll take it.
You need some traffic in front of the net in a game like that. And so I think that's the one thing I'm still waiting for. Beckett Hendrickson has got the physique and build to be one of those guys. I think Jimmy Clark has the demeanor to be one of those guys. We'll see who else can step up. August Falloon coming back to the lineup, he could be one of those guys. Eric Paulson, even though he's a Euro, he's a pretty tough player, and he could be one of those guys as well.
Nice backhanded compliment. Quick one, and then the question that I know you're ready for since you have been listening to the show, but what year is it that the first CHL alum plays for the Gophers?
Well, it's looking like Hayden Reed could be that player. He's a player committed to the Gophers. Jess Myers reported in his story that he still intends to get to Minnesota, even though he's going back to CHL. We'll see if it's not him. I do get the sense from this staff that they're wary of this new recruiting land of CHL players. Are they ready to be NCAA players? There's that article in The Athletic a while ago where there's couple of college guys, living on a couple of CHL guys, and the CHL guys didn't know how to boil pasta. There is just a different mindset between the college player and the junior player. So trying to find that right fit for Minnesota will be important. And it's certainly attractive. You know, McKenna just came across the top of the Corey Pronman draft list for 2026. Does he play college hockey for a year?
Man, he's a player.
He's a player. It would make sense for him to be at North Dakota. That just seems like too good of a fit. Probably won't be Minnesota. But I mean, how could you imagine like some of the Wild prospects finishing that 20-year-old year at Minnesota?
I'm so upset that this doesn't kick in until August, because Billy might go and drag Riley Heidt back here to play for the Gophers.
Exactly. Like that would make so much sense. That would make so much sense.
Fun. I think the Gophers would have no problem with sellouts moving forward if that was the case. Oh my God, people would go nuts. Interesting. Okay. Well, last question. Every interview for our good friends at Waggle Golf. Everybody go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in SP10 to take 10% off your entire order. Vegoe, dream golf foursome, dead or alive, athlete, celebrity, could be a fictional character. I think we've had a couple of those. Who are the three that round out your foursome?
I mean, I got to have my dad in my foursome. You know, he's the one who introduced me to the game. And I think we have Jack and Arnie join us for the foursome. I just think two historic golf players that did it the right way. It'd be fun to, you know, play around with the Golden Bear and have an Arnold Palmer during, after. You know, that's my group.
Just takes
Arnie's Army and the Bear
commercial, the ESPN commercial where they just watch him mix it and they're all like, "Oh my God, that was cool."
So cool watching him do
it. Now, who's riding with you and who's riding with your dad in the carts?
I think we're alternating. I think
nice.
Every 6 holes we switch it up. We probably play a game where you have a different partner for every 6 holes, and you know, get some points on the line, a little 4-ball action. I think that's the way to do it.
I like where your head's at. That's a good idea.
I'm finishing with Jack though. I've got Jack in the last 6.
There you go. Perfect. Well, Viggs, appreciate you jumping on. Pump away. I don't know what guests you and Jupe have lined up coming up here, but everyone make sure that you go check out the Gopher Puck Live podcast, YouTube, on all the socials, even over on the new Butterfly app.
Yeah. A lot of college hockey people heading over that way. But yeah, we'll have Mike Carmen on this week. We'll have Jordan Leopold and Nick Angel on for our Thanksgiving show. We got Sam Rossini coming up. He's one of the new play-by-play guys. So a lot of Gopher alums coming up on our show. And we hope you join us live and stick around for OT. Jump in the chat. We always love that from our fans, or tweet us or X us or blue sky us, whatever you need to do. We're out there.
Perfect. Well, thanks for jumping on, Viggs. We'll definitely have you back on at some point throughout the year, catching up on, all the Gophers and maybe a little bit of bourbon talk too.
Long-time listener, first-time guest. Thanks for having me on.